What's up, guys? Ben here. We're bringing you another video today. We're continuing our post-champs off-season preview season recap review videos. Today, we're going to talk a little bit about the Toronto Ultra. A little bit of an interesting journey this season. We're going to dive in, chat a little bit about it, talk a little bit about their contract situation, some of the stats, some of the priorities, and what I think they should do with some of the really intriguing options they have on both their starting lineup, their bench, and their challengers teams. Let's dive in. Let's talk a little bit about sort of a high-level Cold War and sort of the thought process going into this season. So as a recap for y'all that maybe need a refresher or didn't watch Cold War, you know, this Toronto team came in with methods on the team. They dropped him for Jamie Craven, aka Insight, after stage 1, and they were very good. They instantly were the best team, second best team at Major 2, and they actually won Major 2 off the back of a great performance from Ben Vance. These guys rolled it, and they were a top team for the rest of the season. They came up just short at Major 5, obviously the tough super loss to Minnesota, and then they had another tough loss against FaZe. So going into the offseason, they were like a de facto number 2 team. Obviously, everybody kind of expected this optic sort of Dallas situation to make them a top team. So they're like, okay, you know, going into the season, probably Thieves, Toronto, FaZe, and Optic were probably your top 4. So the Toronto team ended up sticking it and not making any changes to their starting lineup going into the season. They pull up, they start the season, they actually go ahead and they win Kickoff Classic, a preseason tournament, but we should mention that they start off the season really, really strong with a dub. They look like the best Berlin, S&D, and Hardpoint team. It's like, okay, these guys might run it back this year and be a real contender. And it's kind of a mixed bag for them during the Major 1 qualifiers. They get a couple of 3-0s against LAG in Florida, but they lose to Thieves Optic in Seattle, and they just make it into winner's bracket due to those 2 3-0s and having the advantage over teams like LAG and Boston and Florida and Minnesota. They go back to Esports Stadium Arlington, which is where Kickoff Classic was for Major 1. They start off with a nice Game 5 victory over Thieves, but they do lose, surprisingly, I think, a little to their EU compatriots over on the London team in 4 maps. This is when you start to see, like, okay, they played 2 series. They won 0 hard points across those 2 series. You're like, what's going on with this team? They do clutch up against Boston, but again, it's not off the back of their respawn or hardpoint play. It's strong S&D play. And then they run into a FaZe team that's good at all modes and really struggling on hardpoint, bites them in the butt. Like, they legit, I'm pretty confident that they won 0 hardpoints at this event and got top 4, which is actually crazy if you think about it. I don't think I've ever heard or seen a team do that, but we're clearly not destined to win this event if they couldn't get it done on maps 1 and 4. Major 2 qualifiers, Toronto really actually struggled during this stage. Their only victory was against Minnesota. They lost to New York. They lost to Paris, giving Paris one of their only couple of dubs this season. Boston and Atlanta FaZe. A bunch of those were in Game 5s, but again, the respawn weakness is starting to really show again. They're very good, if not one of the best S&D teams, but they cannot get it done, especially on map 1s, and we'll talk about those stats after we finish this recap portion. Major 2, this will be in Minnesota, not a tough or not a far distance for the Toronto team coming from the great country of Canada. And unfortunately for Toronto, they play 1 series and then they're out of there. They lose to the LAG boys, who do actually end up winning the tournament, but a really disappointing top 12 finish for Toronto. Would not have expected that in the beginning of the season. So in Pro-Am, they're drawn, this is the Pro-Am event that's in Columbus, Ohio. They get drawn into Group A with Seattle and FaZe. And Toronto actually played pretty good. They get it done against Seattle and the Strike X team, but they do lose to FaZe, but they end up making it 2nd seed. They pull up to the bracket stage, and they go ahead and they get a victory over Florida in 4 maps, but they run into eventual tournament winners New York and also get it done in 4 maps, but not in a positive fashion. Not a bad top 4 placing for Toronto, a good rebound from Major 2, and something to build on as they look to qualify for COD Champs. Major 3 qualifiers go a little bit better than the last qualifier stage. They are able to go 4-1 and get some really good victories along the way versus Seattle, versus New York, versus London Royal Ravens. They do lose to Minnesota, but it was in a Game 5 fashion, and Minnesota, to be fair, was probably the best team online at that point, with a 5-0 record. All right, so this is Toronto's kind of home event. They're hosting, finally, after 3 years, they're hosting an event in Toronto. Team's looking a little bit better. And unfortunately, they have to open their tournament against the team that was probably the most consistent this season, Atlanta FaZe. And FaZe get it done in 4 against Toronto. You're seeing a theme here, a lot of Game 4 losses. And Toronto get bounced to losers. They pull up in losers on Friday, and they take care of business against Paris at home in front of their home crowd. It was very loud in the building. I can tell you that personally because I was there. They 3-0 Minnesota next, a very impressive 3-0. And they also then 3-0 Florida. So Toronto was rolling at this point in front of that crowd. Like, people were getting turned. All right, so starting off Saturday, Toronto keep the train rolling. They run up against a Thieves team that was coming off a good win versus Optic. And Toronto, with their improved gameplay, get it done and get the victory against Thieves and advance to the losers finals, in which they get a rematch against Atlanta FaZe. And it's a real banger, real classic series. A lot of fantastic moments. Unfortunately, Toronto come up short in that game 5, and FaZe kind of grind it out. For Toronto, I would say it was a successful event. Obviously, you wanted to win in front of your home crowd, but considering how the tournament started on Thursday, I think getting top 3 in this event, and considering obviously FaZe and Seattle were the other 2 teams at this and how those 2 teams kind of placed at the end of the season, I think top 3 was not particularly bad for Toronto. Job's not done for Toronto, though. They still need to do a little bit of work to go ahead and lock in their spot for champs. And they don't get off to the best of spots in the Major 4 qualifiers. They go 2-3, and they actually get the tiebreaker over LAG in order to actually make it the winners bracket. For Toronto, they lose 0-3 to FaZe, they lose a game 5 to Boston, and they lose a 3-1 to London Royal Ravens. But they are able to beat LAG in 3-2, and they are able to beat Optic in a game 5. So a mixed bag for the Toronto team, but they're still definitely in the mix to qualify for champs at this point. And then we pull up to the event in New York. They start off with the EU rematch against their compatriots on the London Royal Ravens. It is a banger series, definitely a surprise. On my end, I picked London to win this series. Well, it's probably a mistake because I kind of forgot about how London, maybe I was banking on London being a little bit more improved in land, but Toronto played very good and took it done in game 5. Again, though, they're doing not really off the back of Respawn, a lot of really strong S&D play. But they run into it again, Thieves. And this time Thieves get it done against them. They looked dominant in the series, outclassed Toronto on Saturday, and Thieves send them to the losers or the elimination bracket, however you want to call it. In order to make it to Sunday, Toronto would have to beat an Optic Texas team that was on a little bit of a run from losers. And again, another game 5 heater. I think this is a very winnable series, honestly, for Toronto, and one that they may look back on at the end of the season as one they definitely sort of gave away. They had opportunities to win map 1 in this series. Shotzi went big in a Bocage hardpoint, and then again on Bocage later in the series. There were a couple of rounds in S&D that were like a gunfight that someone on Toronto should have won, and they somehow lost it, and would have probably changed the direction of the map. I think if Toronto had won this series, they would have faced FaZe. They would have had a pretty good shot against FaZe, who were not playing like super amazing at this tournament at the time. Do I think they would have beaten Thieves or New York? It's hard to say, but I definitely think they could have placed better at top 6. With all things considered, top 6 not too bad. You qualified for champs. Still some momentum to build on going to the final event of the season. So Toronto start off, and unfortunately, have a really tricky draw against an Optic Texas team once again. Everybody had circled this matchup on their bracket as one to watch, and it definitely did not disappoint. But Optic proved too strong on map 5 and get it done and send Toronto to losers. On Friday, Toronto faced off against the Boston Breach, and as many predicted, Boston will get top 8 this tournament. Toronto get it done in 4. Seattle dropped down from winners with their loss to FaZe in a game 5 round 11, so they end up matching up against Toronto Ultra, and this is unfortunately where Toronto's season ends. Pred proves too much for them, and the respawns again a problem for Toronto. As good as they are in Surge, they can't overcome Seattle, and unfortunately Toronto plays top 6 at champs. All right, so let's take a look at kind of like where I'm kind of going with this, guys. So shout out IOU Turtle for his your tracker sheet here. You see for Toronto, they basically played sub 500 Call of Duty this season. And it's pretty obvious if you look at this, what I think was probably the problem for them this season, hard points. And it's actually crazier if you dive in. Toronto Ultra in 37 game 1s only won 12 of them this season. And look, they were winning 60% of their game 2s because they were an elite S&D team, but they put themselves in a lot of tricky holes this season. A lot of sort of 50-50 game 5 bangers. And it's, some years you'll end up on the right side of that, some of them you won't. But they were constantly down 0-1 this year, and it didn't really help them in sort of closing out or getting ahead of some of these teams this season. And I think it's something they're going to need to address in the offseason. We'll take a look at the overall KD numbers here and shout out my boy Easy Mac for the sheet. Slaying was just all over the place. Their best performing Slayer was a player that substituted in for one game Scrappy, and we'll get to him later in this video. But you look at Insight, you look at Cammy, guys that were absolutely lighting up the scoreboard last season, take over, not the same seasons this year. And your 2 sub players finishing with an overall essentially a 0.9. Really disappointing seasons for both Ben Vance and Kleenex. And I think a lot of this again comes towards Hardpoint, talking about this is Hardpoint specific stats right here. You see the KDs. 0.9 for your subs. ARs averaging a 1. This really poor slaying across the board for the Toronto Ultra team. They are near the bottom of the league in Team KD in hardpoint. That's just unacceptable for a team that was so good at it last year. So, all right, let's talk about the team, their contract situation, and what I think they should do. So, overall goals, again, as a refresher, overall goals. If I were the GM of this team, right, or if I'm Marky B, the head coach, we need to get better at respawn. We are a good S&D team. We have good S&D fundamentals. I mean, look, you take a look at the overall S&D stats throughout the season. Ultra was fourth only. Teams better. Obviously, Rocker didn't make it a chance, but they were minus S&D this year. FaZe, obviously, you expect to be there or thereabouts in S&D. And Optic were the best S&D team statistically and overall win percentage during the season. So everybody on the team, as you look and see on my contract tracker sheet, are under team options. So if you're Marky B, you're Adam Adamu, anyone in the front office trying to figure out what are we going to do about this team. Clearly the slaying was a problem. Clearly the hard point was a problem. And those need to be addressed if we want to catch up to Thieves, catch up to FaZe, catch up to Seattle, catch up to Optic. They have a lot of potential decisions to make here. And it's a hard read. I think a couple of things are key. One, I think you got to give Scrappy a look on this team to start for next season. You can't let him walk to another team and make them better. You got to figure out how to slot him into this lineup in probably one of those flex or mini AR spots. So I think like your easy option is have Cam run a second sub and then you have actually bench Ben or send Ben to another team. Would be the easiest way to do it. Now, if you want Cam to be an AR, maybe you also explore benching inside and making Cam the main and then having Scrappy the flex. There's a lot of different ways they can go down this, or they can do the Toronto thing from the first year and just kind of not really commit to a starting lineup in the beginning of the season. Scrappy comes in and kind of really brings a lot more slaying for them. We saw what he did in challengers. We saw what he did when he substituted online for them. I think he would pack a little bit more punch. You obviously always have a little risk for someone who hasn't played in the league, but I respect and I think Toronto has made good roster decisions the last couple of years. So you really can't let him walk to another team because he would instantly start somewhere else. I think you got to live and die by Toby. I don't think you can really send Kleenex anywhere. It's going to be really hard to get another aggressive sub the mix of plays that he does, and it's not an easy position. So I think he's a lock. But it's the Bance Clammy inside trio that, is a little mixy. I do think that if you're Toronto, you will give Shotzi a call. You may even give Ender a call. I don't think either of those guys are going to Toronto, but, courtesy call to see if they're interested in your project is worth it. Do they explore Hydra? It's possible. It's possible. I don't know if it's the best fit for him, but I could see an exploration on the Toronto side to see if the fit is there and if there's interest. Another interesting potential option for me, I think that if you are Toronto, you might explore. They were interested in Clayster on the first year of the CDL. They did register interest with him. He did not end up going with them, obviously. But I could see if they want to try and bring in some NA-based talent, some USA, born talent to try and maybe mix up the dynamic of the team. Dylan attached as well as another player I think that they can potentially take a look at. Skies and Awakening are good. I just don't know if those guys are a fit for how they want to play. Maybe Caesar more than Big Wake. But these are, kind of my overall thoughts is I look at sort of the free agent pool. And again, there are team option players that maybe don't get picked up and that sort of changes this overall conversation. But I don't see a lot here outside of like the Hamid Shotzi or Dylan or Hydra that really make their team better. I'm also curious if they're going to do a Hexy because with the emergence of Scrappy, that sort of really pushes Hexy out of what I thought was sort of a next up picture because he got picked up first on this roster. They picked up Scrappy in the middle of the season. And so I wonder if they maybe won't renew Hexy or they'll keep him and he'll continue to run challengers. And obviously their challengers team, their NA challengers team was good. Obviously lost to the Iron Blood Gaming guys at Challengers Champs, but they were the dominant, Toronto Academy NA was the ultimate final boss for challengers this year up until that final event of the season. And of course, we got to tip the coaching staff on Toronto. They're going to probably run it back with the squad. They've done a really good job building a culture of competition and winning here, but they've just got to make some tough decisions now on who should stay and who should go if they want to step it back up to the next level. I think the final other thing, because we didn't really talk about amateur players, and this team has always shown a willingness to pick up amateur players, especially from the EU region. Obviously, you see these two players, Vickle and Assault, were on their academy team. They could maybe entertain options there. Mohawk was on their team at one point this season and actually beat them at Challengers Champs. All three, Assault and Mohawk are sort of more main AR players. Vickle can be more of an entry sub, but I don't think that the Vickle for Kleenex swap would make them any better, so to speak. If they want to continue this sort of journey of EU talent that might be interesting, you've got Beans, who's on their Ultra EU squad, who's sort of an interesting option, especially from a flex standpoint. Wardy is sitting on Timor, but he's another SMG type that might be interesting if they want to go down the route. And look, guys, when I say this, keep in mind that Toronto rolled like a deep roster in year one. So I won't be surprised if they pick up multiple substitute players this season to manage the risk of their team and give themselves more options if they want to rotate players. So yeah, that'll do it for this video. I think this Toronto team, just for my final thoughts, this is a massive team, massive offseason for this Toronto Ultra organization. They came in, they had a really bumpy year one, ended up actually winning that last homestand and being pretty competitive at champs. We're really good year two, got to grand finals, and this year weren't as competitive. They need to keep that winning pedigree and keep up with some of the teams that are stacking talent. They have guys that know how to win, but the slaying at the level that you would expect wasn't here this year, and whether that's on Vanguard or what have you is obviously TBD. I know that from my understanding about the Toronto Ultra situation this year, they did try to make some changes, or the org was pushing some changes, and this happens on a lot of other teams, but they talked to the players, and the players wanted to keep the project going. They listened to their guys and kept running it back, but I think that ship has sailed. I think the Toronto team will likely make changes in the offseason, and the options we talked, there's a lot of different routes they can go down. It's a little unpredictable, but let me know in the comments what you think they should do, because they are going to be a huge player in the next couple of weeks here and making some moves with their roster. As always, guys, if you liked the video, obviously smash that like button. Hit me with the subscribe. Would appreciate any support on the channel. We'll continue doing these off-season videos. We're going to do some one-on-one interviews. We're going to do some reporting on moves as they come in. Really excited for all the content coming down the pipe on YouTube, and we'll see you guys later. Thank you so much.